Hi, folks. Today I'm going to talk to you about two things that are profoundly important to any type of success that you want to have academically or, most importantly, test wise. And the two topics I'm going to briefly touch upon right now are organizational skills prior to writing anything, profoundly important. And the second thing is time management. Uh, Regarding the test time that you have to take a test. Let me talk to you about the first one, organizational management, okay? What does this mean? Well, I used to have an acronym I used to give to my students prior to writing any type of an essay. It's called ROW, ROW. Like, you row a boat, ROW. And typically in an essay, they'll give you 30 minutes or 35 minutes to answer one essay. Typically, you could have up to, say, for example, 5 essays, okay, times 30 minutes, something like that, or 10 essays in 3 hours. Whatever it is, you have to figure out how much time do I have to answer each and every essay. So let's say, for example, you have 3 hours to answer 5 essays. Okay? 3 hours into 5 essays. So you have to spend an appropriate amount of time per each essay. Okay? Now let's go back to a standard one so you can understand the concept. Let's say a 30-minute essay. So if you have 5 questions, and you can only spend 30 minutes on each question. It's crazy if you spend an hour on the first question if you only have 30 minutes to spend. Why? Because if you spend an hour on that first essay question, typically what happens is people are nervous when they start writing. You're going to run out of runway, so to speak, and you're going to do a lousy job, a terrible job on essay number 5. And each essay typically is worth the same amount of grades. Okay, so what you want to do is figure out how much time do I have to do this set of essays, and then break your time up accordingly. So now I have 30 minutes to write one essay. How the heck am I going to write an essay in 30 minutes? Let's use the ROW technique that I've used for 30 years for my students, and I think it's very helpful. ROW, read, organize, and write. Number 1, R, read. You need to read the hypothetical quickly for the first, say, 3 minutes. Read it, or 2 minutes, depending on your skill level for reading and comprehension. You got to go right to the call of the question or the interrogatory, see what it's all about, and then afterwards you got to read the hypo once, and then you got to read the hypo a second time so you can understand what is being asked. And focus on that interrogatory. That's all you need to focus on, nothing else. So for a couple of minutes, you have to understand what the question is about. Read, okay? Then you have to organize. Organize is probably the most important thing. Before you put a, a pen onto a piece of paper or type something up, you have to have you have to have it together, so to speak. All right, you know what I'm talking about. So that means you go back to that hypothetical and you tear it apart line by line, sentence by sentence. And you ask yourself, why is that sentence there? And here is where you got to generate your outline. Here's where the outline gets generated from, right there. Now, before you start generating an outline, make sure you understand what Mrs. Brady used to say. You only have one chance to make a first impression. All right? So that means that no matter what you're going to put down on that outline, the most important points of that question need to be addressed first. Okay? First. Don't let a reader try to find out a major point halfway through your essay. Okay, so focus on what are the major points. All right, so you got to read first time quickly to get the grasp of the question. Now you got to tear it apart and you got to go line by line. So let's say, for example, you figure out that this is, let's say it's a criminal law question, okay? So the first thing you do is you find the crimes and you write down the major crimes as you see them, all right? You got to do this for a good chunk of time, okay? Read for a couple minutes, outline now for 4 or 5 minutes. So you write the crime down, and right next to the crime, you write down the elements of that crime. All right? So you spot the crime, you write down the elements of the crime, and those are called buzzwords. You need to have the buzzwords. You have to let the reader know that you know that it's for example, a battery or a robbery or whatever crime it is you've picked. You're able to spot the issue, but now you have to put down some buzzwords that are germane to that issue. So you write down the elements, whatever the elements are. And then finally, a crime is not a crime unless the prosecution establishes beyond a reasonable doubt the elements of the crime and there are no defenses. So if you see a defense, you have to write that down too. So your first outline should look like first dot, okay? Robbery. Then you put down the buzzwords for robbery. And then you put down defenses for robbery. If there aren't any defenses, you say it, okay? And you climb down that essay, line by line, sentence by sentence. That's how you want to do it. Now, the other thing about if it's a contract question, for example, heads up, is this a contract question for common law contract or is this a contract question for Article 2 sales contract? Spot that issue, okay? So you put down UCC Article 2, sales. Then the next thing you got to put down, 4-year statute of limitations, okay, is your buzzword, okay? Then you have to find the formation of the contract. It's an executory bilateral contract. You always want to use the word executory because that means that there's agreement on both sides. So you find the executory bilateral contract by physically writing down the words offer, acceptance, consideration. Okay, offer, acceptance, and consideration. Now, are there any defenses to that contract? You put that down. Finally, you got to talk about the last portion. You got to talk about your damages, your compensatory damages. Usually they're compensatory damages in nature, and you want to put it down. So you work your way down that essay. And by the way, for a contract question, make sure that you understand dates. Circle the dates. At the very minimum, it could be a statute of limitations issue. So this is how you do an outline. Number 1, major points first. Number 2, as you spot the issues, write down your buzzwords. So say, for example, you spend 2 or 3 minutes reading, and now you've come up with 5 minutes of ripping that fact pattern together. So what do you have left? Maybe you have 16 to 20 minutes, 16 minutes, 18 minutes to write an answer. Let's say it's 16 minutes. And your answer has to be 3 pages long or 4 pages long. If it's 4 pages long, that means you could spend 4 minutes on each page. So you're managing your time, okay? And then finally, the last section, write. I say write like hell because now you have an outline. You have an outline of the issues, you have your buzzwords, you have your defenses if there are any defenses, and you got to talk about damages. And then you write systematically, time-wise, and you get off that question exactly in 30 minutes, period, and that's it. And then you move on to the next one. Take a deep, clean, healing breath. Breathe in through your nostrils. Exhale through your mouth. Get that blood pressure down and do a second question. Number 2, read, organize, and write. It's the same technique. Remember, writing an essay is a 2-pronged two prongs to write an effective essay. And that, of course, is, besides sticking to the rule of grammar that I talked about previously. But the two prongs are know the law or know the subject. Knowledge of the subject is the sine qua non, so to speak, of getting a good answer. Number one, and applying what you know to the hypothetical, applying what you know to the fact pattern. So every question gets the exact same amount of time. Profoundly important. Generating an outline. And the more questions you do, the better it's going to give you. In the next video, I'll probably give you a technique to use on being able to write so you don't freeze. Okay, that's a whole subject for the next thing. So the first thing is generating the outline. The second thing is time management, especially for multiple choice questions. So for example, if you have 100 question multiple choice test staring you right in the face, and you have 3 hours to take 100 question multiple choice, that means you have 1.8 minutes to do one question. Okay? Now, how the heck are you going to do that? Because what happens is typically, especially at the beginning, you freeze up. It's that anxiety is hitting you in the face. It's called intellectual stress, where you're reading a line, you're reading a sentence, and the more you're reading it, the more anxious you're getting. You're saying, "Oh my God, I can't understand what Tom, Dick, and Harry is about," blah blah blah, and you just begin to talk to yourself. Okay, watch out for intellectual stress. Chill. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do for a multiple choice is, again, go to the answers, the 4 answers. Scan the answers. Okay? If they're mixing up subjects, contracts, torts, criminal law, real property, whatever it is, at least by scanning the answers, you're going to understand that that question is a contracts answers, because there are 4 contract answers right in front of you. So then when you go back to the hypothetical, you read that contract in the law of, read that question in the law of contracts. Contracts, okay? You got to go down that hypothetical. Again, now, here's the key. If it's 100 questions, and you have 3 hours, and you have 1.8 minutes to answer that one hypothetical question, that means you have to work at a 8 to 9 question per 15-minute pace. Okay, if you do 8, that's 32 questions an hour. If you do 9 questions, which is what I suggest, that's 36 questions an hour. I like the 9 question per 15-minute pace, only because halfway through, if you wanted to take a break, go into the men's room or ladies' room, you have a little bit of time to do that. So manage your time. And then finally, the secret for those questions is, again, if you know the law. There's no substitute for knowing the law. Again, it's a two-step approach to answering a multiple choice question. Number 1 is knowing the law. And number 2 is applying what you know to the fact pattern. So it becomes a process, seriously, when you have a lot of experience and you do a bunch of questions, and by a bunch I mean hundreds, several hundreds, maybe even a couple of thousand questions, practice questions beforehand, that by the time you read the hypothetical, you're going to understand. And before you get to those 4 fact patterns, you're going to play like a judge. You're going to figure out, okay, this guy is innocent or guilty, and in my head, why? Okay? And if you look at the 4 answer choices, there'll be 2 answers that say guilty because, and then another 2 answers that it's going to say innocent because, or not guilty because. So what you're going to do is, once you've established in your head that the person is not culpable, is not guilty, and you have 4 answer choices, read the 2 answers that you can think it's going to be. Read them both. And chances are you're going to get that question right, okay? And remember, when you have it down to 2 questions that you know it is going to be one of the 2, how do I pick the one that probably is the correct answer? Very simple. pick the question rather, that has the legal buzzword in it over the correct statement of fact that's in the fact pattern. So always pick law over fact. So you have two answers. One has a correct statement of law. The other one has a correct statement of fact that's in the fact pattern. Law over fact. And that's really how you do multiple choice questions. So remember, read, organize, and write for your essays. And time management, 9 questions for 15 minutes, check. And make sure that at the end of that first hour, you're up to question 36, and you're going to be just fine. Okay? Watch this video a couple of times so you understand it. Okay? Ciao.